How's that? Can you hear me now? Hello? Got to wait for the catch up. There we go. So yeah, I will start again. Yeah. So hair, bit of a change, bit of a mess. So fun, especially the where the dye kind of went. So yeah, that's a whole ass thing. The orange, I liked it, but it was kinda not lasting long, and yeah, so I'm probably gonna go back to green. And also, I need to finish off a haircut. Like, I had to cut quite a bit off because of bleach damage. Um, and you can see where my fringe has a lot of growth, and now since it's like completely grown out, I obviously need to cut one back in because I'm a psychopath. So yeah, I need to figure out what sort of haircut to do, I guess, because I want something, and I like low maintenance stuff because yeah, some days depression really be kicking my ass. So I want something easy. Wait, you're not blue? Hang on a sec. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Ding. Ba, 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 ba. No. Right, there we go. Let's get the last little bit up because my live stream is always a hot mess. Ta-da! Right. Queen. Right, there we go. Right, you should be blue now. Get the short lesbian haircut. Oh, a bit exhausted. Actually went out to town today, did a thing, and bumped into like all of my friends, which was interesting. So like went out, bumped into my neighbour. So me and her were hanging out, our kids were hanging out together, that was great. Then we were at the park and I bumped into my like best mate. So then it became that. And then as we were leaving, I bumped into my other friend who we're now having a play date tomorrow, and it was this whole thing. So like a bit exhausted there. And also I'm starting to actually do exercise. So yeah, there's that. Yeah. Might actually end up becoming, nice and trim and buff and all that shit. Probably won't, but So yeah, it's Easter holidays at the moment, so streams for me may be a bit time wise, don't know. It's just going to be a hot mess while it's school holidays, basically. But it won't be too much different than normal way. Right, that one I don't need. That's me. Here we go. Right. I want to move me there. Okay. God. The swell Vila arc is from my fucking childhood. Like, I don't know how many know. Like, cause I have mentioned it before, but like, not for a while. So, I'm a ex-competition athlete. I used to do athletics. So, for America, track and field. And I did high jump, mostly. My main events were high jump, shot put, and discus. I would do hammer throw. Long jump, triple jump. So what was it? High jump, long jump, triple jump, shot put, discus, javelin, hammer throw, and relays. So yeah, like, and it was big. I would train Tuesdays and Thursdays. I would train at my local track. Then Wednesdays, Saturdays, and or Sundays. Wednesdays I would train in Ashford with my high jump coach. Then Saturdays and Sundays, if it was the off season, which is literally only a few weeks between outdoor season ending and indoor season starting, on that few weeks I would be doing training, or Saturday and Sunday would be the 2 competition days. And I would do all of that from the age of 9 till 14, 15. Yeah, 14, because I was in the under 15 category. And so, yeah, that was like a thing I did. My mum ended up being a coach, and she actually coached her triple jumpers to the Junior Olympics. So, yeah, and it was a lot. Like, my sister nearly qualified to be in the Junior Olympics. So it goes like, you'll do normal competitions, then you'll do like Kent schools. You win Kent schools, you go on to English schools. You win English schools, you go on to like the Junior Olympic kind of thing, where you compete against everyone. So yeah, it was like this whole thing, and I made it to Kent schools. But while I liked it, I wasn't that good. I was like average. High jump, my PB was like can't remember, 1 meter 64. But that was not at a what is it? I can't remember what it is. Like UCAA? No, KCAA. That wasn't a KCAA sanctioned event, so the measurement doesn't count. It's not like an official one. My official one was like 158, 1 meter 58. Hey, Shadow. So yeah, and then I just kind of like never started doing sports again, and my sportiness, whatever you want to call it, just kind of like deteriorated really badly. Yeah, I have a huge ass cabinet full of medals and trophies and a shield. Like, me and my sister won this massive shield, and yeah, it was really cool. We made history. Oh, thank you, Shadow. We made history with this shield because my sister won it for 4 years in a row, and I won it for the next 2. That's only because for 2 years of it, I was competing against my sister. And yeah, so like we were the only people in history. My sister was the only one to win it for 4 years in a row since that award was established. And we were the first family to win it, let alone consecutively. So it was like really cool. No, I gave up the occulty. I gave up the sporty stuff because I was in a shitty abusive relationship, and I gave up sport because of boys. And then once I stopped, I got out of it, and then for getting into it, everything got really my medical condition got so painful. It was just I couldn't do it anymore. Yep, Poundland were having a sale. I was the best at becoming last in a 75-meter sprint at Sports Day. Yep. Everybody gets an award. Yay! Anyway, you didn't come here to hear me brag about my fucking past day. Yeah, life throws you a curveball, but I still have that part of my childhood. I have such great memories from it. I really do. I made such amazing friends. Yeah, and it also, from a young age, introduced me to very different people because we were going around all of Kent and out of Kent as well a lot of the times. So I was meeting all different people that I wouldn't have met if I stayed in my local town. I was meeting where I lived. It was a very white town, and also religion. You didn't see a lot of anyone that was religion wasn't shown that much. So doing this, I met all different types of people. I met a load of Muslims. I was hanging out with loads of black people constantly and getting to know all of loads of people, and it was just good being being around so many different kinds of people. It really does make sure that you don't grow up to be a bigot. Because it's you hear all this fucking racist shit and you're well, I know that's not right, because when you've met so many different people from this particular group that they're trying to be racist about or bigoted about, and you're well, none of the people I've met did that, and I've met a lot of them, so you're wrong. Yeah, the sport bit was great. Anyway, like I said, let's get on with the storying. I made my screen too big. Okay, there we go. Okay. So this is, hang on. Okay. This is, if they approach you, do not tell them the time, make an excuse, and leave. Bye. The creepy scribbler. They may be a child selling flowers on the side of a run-down street, or even a scruffy-looking man stood by a market stall flogging fake branded t-shirts. It doesn't matter in what situation you are in, do not, under any circumstances, give them the time. Make an excuse, run, or just say nothing. My name is Tom, and I came face to face with one of them 4 years ago. Me and Scott were out in town on our way to a sports bar to watch the game. As we rounded the corner onto our deserted street, Cherry Road, we were suddenly approached by a frail man. He had smoky grey thinning hair and a rugged, world-weary face. His shabby brown moth-eaten suit jacket hung upon his tired body as he tightly clutched a case full of jewellery. "Anything take your fancy, sir?" he said, brandishing yellow-stained, uneven teeth. "Aw, samesies." "No, thank you," I swiftly replied as I raised my hand towards him. "Are you sure? Not even a lovely pair of diamond earrings for a special lady?" he quickly contended while moving into our path. "We said we're fine. Please move out our way." Scott sneered back at him as he swerved his body around the gaunt-looking pest. "Can you at least tell me the time?" the man called out as we continued along our path. Scott glanced at his phone and turned back and shouted, 12:15. We both then crossed the road and headed towards the illuminated sign of the bar. Though it appeared strange in this day and age that someone would ask the time, seeing the amount of technology we have around us. We both grew up in an era of wristwatches and wall clocks, so we weren't too unfamiliar with this question. As harmless as that man's query was, the following days were not. After the game had finished in our favour, we proceeded to keep the beers flowing in celebration well into that evening. I'm not sure how I got home that night, but I certainly remember how I was awoke the next morning. My phone vibrated frantically on my cabinet as my generic ringtone charmed me from my slumber. I groggily woke up and answered, my voice husky and irregular. "Hello? Tom, are you up?" "Scott, is that you?" I said, trying to adjust my eyes. "Yes, something weird happened to me last night, man," he replied, seemingly full of energy. "Do you even remember last night?" I responded while chuckling. "Tom, no, listen. You know that old annoying man? The guy tried to sell us jewellery yesterday? He came back. Yesterday he came back in a calm but serious tone. Yeah, he was weird. What about him?" I quizzically asked. "I saw him down my road as I was walking home last night. I had turned onto my street and he was there, just standing at the bus stop," Scott said, now talking in a faster and more eccentric manner. "That's pretty strange, dude, but probably just a coincidence." "He was at a bus stop after all," I responded, trying to bring rational conclusion to the situation. "Yeah, that's what I thought at first, but all the buses in our area had stopped by the time we left at 10:45. Scott eagerly came back, challenging my hypothesis. "I think you're reading too much into this, bro. It's not like he was at your door or anything," I said jokingly, trying to ease Scott's concern. "Plus, you were drinking quite a lot, if I remember correctly," I continued. "You're probably right. It just unnerved me a bit, that's all." he replied, now seeming to accept the situation for what it was. We both had plans that day. He was out with his girlfriend Danielle, and I had to go to my parents for dinner with my wife Samantha. I didn't get much time during weekdays to socialise, as I worked long hours for an insurance company. This meant I didn't speak to Scott again until Thursday night. I had got home from work and was about to sit down to eat with Samantha when my phone rang. Hey, what's up? I answered while my wife glared at me. Tom, I saw him again. He was in the office block window next to mine, just staring at me. Scott frantically started blurting out at me. Scott, chill, man. Are you sure it was him? I asked while trying to calm him again. It was him. I remember that face and that office. It's empty. It's been up for let for like 5 months or so. I looked at Samantha, shook my head and shrugged. I walked into the living room. He may just have another job as a decorator or something, and just so happened to be working at that office. He might have recognised you from Saturday. That might be why he was looking at you, I reassuringly explained. Yeah, I suppose. I have been under a lot of stress at work with the whole takeover and all of the redundancies, Scott replied, his tiredness now filtering through into his voice. I'm just about to eat, so I've got to go, man. See you Saturday, yeah? I finished up our conversation while Samantha peered into the room, gesturing me to come eat. Okay, sorry, bro. Of course. See you Saturday. I'll be to yours around 2, Scott said, now in a more relaxed manner. No problem, man. Any time. See you then. I hung up the phone while wandering back into the kitchen. What was that all about? Samantha asked while cutting into the tender beef joint. Nothing. Just Scott keeps thinking that he's seeing some old jewelry salesman everywhere, I replied. That's weird. Has he got a stalker then? She said while letting out a small laugh. Apparently so. It's probably his wild imagination, though. You know how he gets. I said back to her humorously. We continued our evening meal and settled down for the night in front of a rom-com. We eventually went to bed at about 11 p.m. The next morning I awoke to a few missed calls from Scott. My phone had been on silent during the night and me, being a heavy sleeper, didn't wake. The 3 calls were made at 12:15, 12:20 and 1:14. I immediately thought that there was an emergency and called him back. The rhythmic calling tone sounded for a minute before cutting to his voicemail. I tried a few more times throughout the morning. He wasn't answering. Just before I was going to drive to his, as I left work at 6 p.m, he called me. Scott, what's going on, man? I quickly answered. Sorry, bro. I went to work and forgot my phone, Scott replied in a dejected voice. You called me a couple of times last night. What happened? I said, now quite concerned. The guy, he was at my window last night, just staring. I called you, then the police. I didn't know what else to do, he said between deep sighs. Shit, man, are you okay? Did they get him? I replied, feeling guilty that I hadn't believed his previous worries. Nah, the police came round and checked around my place but didn't find anyone. I'm okay, just a bit freaked out, that's all. I'm just glad this week was done with, to be honest, he said before letting out a deep sigh. Yeah, well, let me know if anything happens tonight and I'll come over. Is Danielle not with you? I asked. No, she's been away all week with work. I'll catch up with you when I see you tomorrow, he said while trying to tie up our conversation. Okay, man, as long as you're good, I said, not quite believing his calm demeanour. I went home, half expecting another call from him that night. He surely wasn't doing well. I even thought about going round to check on him, but I didn't really want to invade his evening. I woke the next day to no missed calls, to my relief. The police must have scared the intruder off, I thought. Scott will be over later today to watch the game, and Samantha was going over to her friends for a baby shower. The time was nearing 3 p.m. and the game would be starting soon. Where was Scott? I thought while checking my phone. I called him a couple of times, growing more and more concerned every time. Each ring I was met with a frustrating voicemail. The game started, but my attention was in my own racing negative thoughts on what may have happened. Half an hour later, my open-ended questions were answered. My phone began to ring. Unknown number. Hello? Good afternoon, sir. Am I speaking with a Tom Greenfield? An official-sounding voice answered. Yes. Who am I speaking to? Sorry. I hesitantly replied, expecting it to be just another cold caller. This is Detective Hammer. There's been an incident involving a Mr. Scott Taylor. I believe you are due to meet him today. Is that correct? What? Yes, he was supposed to come to mine. Is he okay? I choked back, a lump now forming at the back of my throat. Unfortunately, he was involved in an incident earlier today, and we would need you to come down to the police station. We will explain everything once you're here. I agreed and hung up the phone. I started to tremble as I feared the worst. The drive over to the police department was a blur, a terrifying, sickening blur. I pulled up outside and hesitantly went to the desk. They called the detective over from the back office. I noticed Danielle, Scott's girlfriend, was sat in the corner, her eyes red raw with flowing tears running down her blotchy face. The detective led me into a small room with a large rectangular mirror. He went on to tell me how Scott was involved in a RTA, road traffic accident, at 12:15 today, on the corner of Cherry Road and Oakwood Street. He regrettably passed away at the scene. My eyes began to fill as I buried my head into my shaking hands. I managed to compose myself after a few moments. How did it happen? I managed to ask, my voice quivering through tears. The detective began to say that there was no explainable reason why Scott lost control of the vehicle. They were busy looking over CCTV and dashcam footage to decipher the cause. I waited with Scott's parents and Danielle, each of us consoling one another, just as Samantha arrived. I latched onto her as I broke down on what had become the worst day of my life. The next day, we were all called back to the station, as there was an update on the investigation. We sat anxiously awaiting the pending news, and ultimately some answers. We were each called in one by one to the same daunting room. I sat down as Detective Hammer showed me the dashcam footage from the vehicle behind Scott's BMW. I saw Scott pass the sports bar we had been drinking in only a week before. My drifting, now upsetting memories were suddenly interrupted as I watched the small monitor. His car neared the corner just as someone slowly emerged from his back seat. They then lunged their arm around Scott's neck. As the car began to swerve, the screeching tires and smoke seemed to radiate from the screen in front of me. The video then stopped before the fatal impact. "Who the fuck is that?" I shouted, while my breathing grew deeper and more erratic. "We were hoping you could tell us," the detective replied. "We are aware that Mr. Taylor had seen a man throughout the week that he believed was following him," he continued. "Play the video again," I hesitantly said. I watched in horror as I focused on the person in the back seat. He had smoky grey thinning hair and was dressed in a shabby, old brown suit jacket. That's when I realised it was the man that was trying to sell us the jewellery. It's him! The man Scott said was following him, I said while pointing at the screen. Was he in the car when you found Scott? I continued. No, that's the thing. There was nobody else in the car with Mr. Taylor when we arrived, nor did any witnesses see any other people leave the vehicle, the detective said in a puzzled tone. I began to explain to him our brief encounter with the man, saying how he had declined the jewellery and Scott had given him the time, and after the man asked, I then paused and looked at the stopped dash cam footage. The time showed 12:14:58. It was only then that it dawned on me. A seemingly unlocked memory came to mind. Why did the salesman ask the time when in his case sat a row of silver-plated watches? When I had no more information to give the detective, I was allowed to leave. I had a mixture of sadness, anger, and confusion pulsating through my brain. All this anguish all at once. I spent the next few days searching for any sort of logical answer to this madness. I stumbled upon a few other stories in my obsessive search as I went down the unexplained rabbit hole. Each experience I read was told how a stranger had asked the time to an unexpected victim, normally a friend or a family member. Once they had given them the time, they had unwillingly scheduled in their own death. Exactly a week later, in the same location that they answered it. It also described the torment the victims had endured leading up to their demise. Many described the people as demonic predators sent to this world to capture souls for the devil, while others spoke of interdimensional entities that feed off the chase of the hunt, and eventually the killing of their prey. Many of these experiences sounded all too familiar, and yet it couldn't possibly be real. The things these people were talking about did not exist. They just couldn't. Whatever happened to Scott in my eyes was a tragedy, but I can say with full confidence, if a stranger asked me the time again, oh my God, I will say nothing and get as far away from them as possible. Sorry about the hiccups. What time is that for me? Hang on. Oh, 11, wow. Okay. Is everything all right? That's not on my account, is it? Because otherwise, like, that's absolutely fine. Oh, okay. Good, good. I didn't want it to be for me, just for me, because yeah, I'm all right. Okay, we have a choice of two. It's either stop killing yourself, Lucy, or my family doesn't eat meat after 6 p.m. because of the consequences. Was there? I swear there was another one. Okay, consequences. Right. Oh, sorry. 1 second. Right. I found the missing one, so I'll have that ready for next time. Okay. This is by Weird Bryce Guy. My family doesn't eat meat after 6 p.m. I'd always thought this was normal, that other families followed this seemingly basic principle. It wasn't until I moved out that I learned how weird of a thing this was. That other families didn't adhere to what I had always thought to be a fundamental dietary guideline. Only my family believed in the consequence. For nearly 2 decades, I had refrained from eating meat after the clock struck 6, regardless of how much of a craving I happened to have for it. Even if there was plenty left and I hadn't finished my plate, I was expected to either scrape the remains so so much food wasted, or put it in a Tupperware container for the next day. I always tried to get home soon enough to eat dinner before then, but with school and extracurricular activities, that wasn't always possible. I remember when I just finished hosting a session for an after school club and was on my way home, starving, hadn't eaten all day, when I got a text from my father saying that he had bundled all the meat up and to not expect any left out. He'd sent the text at 5:47. I arrived home feeling disappointed, but quickly got over it as it was simply something that had to be done. It was, for us, normal. The fear of the consequence guided our lives. Because of how integral it was to my family. Oh, 1 sec. I just got a delivery from the little one. Look. She made me an Easter picture with the bunnies. The bunnies. Right. Because of how integrous it was to my family, I had never once brought up the topic with friends. Much like how you probably wouldn't bring up the fact that you put your dishes in the sink or the dishwasher. It was never conversationally relevant to bring it up our no meat after 6 rule. To me, it was mundane, unremarkable. It might sound like this was an odd, though ultimately harmless restriction, a familial eccentricity, which many families have in one way or another. And in one way, you're right. I wasn't abused. I slipped up once, and while it was treated gravely, given a stern, though not frighteningly heated warning, there was no traumatic punishment, physical or otherwise. There was some leniency in the exaction of the consequence with regards to children, but the consequence itself was utterly bizarre, so needlessly grim that its very existence made the whole thing unforgivable. I would have rather been raised vegan. I lived a life bereft of meat for some allegedly noble cause than the one I had, because that knowledge, that ever-lurking fear, messed me up in other ways. I don't have PTSD, and neither do I have some psychological block preventing me from eating meat after 6 p.m, thank God. But I do have knowledge of the consequence, and I'd do anything to forget it. When I shared that knowledge with my girlfriend, and how I still adhere to it, something she hadn't consciously noticed, she left me. And not only did she leave me, she called me a lunatic. Me, who had never once said anything certifiably crazy. Me, who treated her with care, respect, and kindness, with an unblemished record of staunch sanity. All because of the fucking consequence. She left yesterday, and in doing so took all of her things from my apartment, which included most of the cookware, since she'd brought hers over in the absence of my own. I'd relied on the microwave and air fryer prior to her moving in. Back to such lowly states, I brought a hot pocket after an unusually exhausting day at work. That olden dinner upon which many have relied throughout the ages, cheeseburger flavour. Additionally, I brought a bag of those low-fat air-fried chicken tenders to supplement the totally nutritious meal. I was physically tired and emotionally wrecked. I guess in the grief of my heartbreak, I had thought it worthwhile to share the events with my cousin during the drive home, with whom I'd always felt close, brotherly connection. Well, he apparently felt it necessary to tell my parents after the call ended, who took it upon themselves to come visit me. While sitting at my small dinner table, eating my hot pocket and tendies, there came a few knocks at the door of my apartment. I got up, answered, and, bewildered, let my parents in. My mum hugged me, and my dad gave me a knowing and solemn pat on the shoulder, and told me in many words that I'd be fine, that I'd find someone better, Absent-mindedly, I brought them into the kitchen and offered them some tendies, since I cooked the whole bag. I hadn't paid attention to the time, ironically, hadn't thought of the one thing that had ended my relationship. My mum's face was the first to change. It went from sympathetically despondent to confused, and then to horrified. My dad's reaction was a little belated, as if he couldn't quite fathom the events. His expression of fatherly contrition slowly melted into a snarl, a visage of mounting contempt. Finally glancing over at the microwave's clock, I realised what I'd done. Speechless, my mother merely stood at the threshold of the kitchen. My father, equally voiceless, gently pushed past her and headed towards the front door. I heard the lock click, and he returned, his face grimly set, resolute. Stunned, I sat there at the table, the cheap meat churning in my gut. My plate, the half-eaten hot pocket and chicken tender crumbs, suddenly seemed like a profane thing. I wanted to sweep it off the table. After guiding my mother to a seat, my father went and leaned against the kitchen counter. His hands clasped together, he looked like a pastor in prayer. His posture almost reverent. A terrible, baneful silence fell upon the kitchen, like the sudden hush of an audience before a public execution. Right, 1 second, guys. There we go. Right, sorry about that. He looked like a pastor in prayer, his posture almost reverent. A terrible, baleful silence fell upon the kitchen, like the sudden hush of an audience before a public execution. "Oh, my son, my baby!" My mother's shaky voice almost broke me. I met her eyes and she averted them, like she couldn't bear to look at me, her own son. I tried to apologize, but my mouth was suddenly dry and the room suddenly felt hot, stifling. I couldn't breathe, let alone form the words. Slowly, things started to feel wrong. Anxiety reared itself like a massive wave. My vision swam, objects becoming blurred, indistinct, amorphous. My own parents became like phantoms, shifting and immaterial. I gripped the table for balance, for stability, as if I were the one losing corporeality. It's happening. My son. Oh my God. I'd never heard my father sound so defeated. His voice almost brought me back, almost reversed the nauseating unreality of my sudden affliction. In my mounting delirium, my mother's whimpering sounded almost musical, sing-songy, like a lullaby she whispers sing to me as a child. When I felt my face begin to slide free from my skull, I screamed. But it was altered, distorted as my lips came loose, as my tongue followed in their wake. As if taking on the burden, my mother let out a scream of her own. To me, the world was now no more than a kaleidoscope, maelstrom of images, one of which was my manically shrieking mother. The rest of my body fell apart in turn. Bits crumbled away, layers sloughed off, fluids leaked and oozed. When there were finally just my skeleton held together by strips and stubborn sinew, my father began to clean up the mess. My mother's mind was pretty much gone. She'd screamed herself senseless, unable to move, she screamed herself senseless. Unable to move, lacking the connective tissue to do so, I just sat and watched as my remains were collected and deposited into a bucket he'd gotten from beneath my sink. The stuff, the meat, was then slowly poured into my sink. The grinding and gurgling of the garbage disposal, as it worked to break up my flesh, somehow calmed me. Would have soothed my nerves, if I'd still had them. When the deed was done, he lifted my bony hand and placed it gently on the table. Then he did the same with the other. I could only watch. My eyes hadn't withered away. He then shuffled around the kitchen and, not finding what he was looking for, went searching throughout the apartment. I couldn't guide him. Not that I would have. I knew what he was searching for. The last thing I wanted was for him to find it. But he found it, eventually. He set the toolbox on the kitchen table as if it was the most delicate thing in the world. It was old. It had been his, but it was sturdy, and the tools inside hadn't been used once since he'd gifted them to me, with both hands as if they were precious jewels inside, he raised the lid and removed the hammer and a few nails. He raised the hammer and then lowered it and helped my mother out of her chair. He led her to my couch and returned, his expression pained but set. He was ready, no matter how much it would hurt him and me. A nail was placed atop my left hand. The hammer struck once, twice. A second nail was placed on my right hand and was embedded to its head with 3 solid, table-shaking strikes. There was somehow pain. All that was left of me was bone and some flimsy pieces of dead flesh, and yet somehow I felt it. More than just a vibration, I actually felt the puncturing of the bone, the fracturing of my hands, some phantom skin sensation. Affixed to the table in a seated crucifixion, I was prisoner. I knew that I had every right to be, given what I'd done, what I'd do if I were free, and yet I was terrified, appalled by my father's eyes, by what I had become, by what he'd done to me without so much as a few calming words. The stink of my discarded, ground-up flesh lingered, wafted up from the garbage disposal, the viscera still clinging to the pipes. I wanted to cry, wanted to scream, but I could only stare and suffer. And then the urge came, insidious and powerful, like a switch had been flipped in my brain, the newly emergent psyche demanding that I perform the unthinkable. It galvanized me, made my bones pulse and quiver. They rattled in place, and I heard my mother moan in fright. My father sat across from me, watching me with hammer in hand, and I, torn between minds, one terrified, the other unthinking, save for that deplorable impulse, stared back. That abysmal silence returned. When my skin began to grow back, the urge increased by magnitudes. I nearly lost myself completely to that abominable impulse. My parents left around the time my face finished reconstructing itself. It felt new, so I'm sure it looked incredibly uncanny, probably more unnerving than the skeleton they'd stared at for nearly an hour. I thought I'd die when the skin formed around my hands, when those new nerves excited to sense and feel were unfairly bombarded by the sudden, inexpressibly excruciating sensation of those long nails in my hand. I let my mind fold into itself. I withdrew into an unthinking fugue. Sorry, I don't know that word. Even after I'd finished regenerating, I sat there for 20, 30 minutes, dreading to rip out the nails, to bring even greater agony upon myself. But I had to, and I did. Thank God I didn't have the voice for the pain, that my vocal cords hadn't yet grown taut enough to handle the sonic burden. I would have brought the whole complex running to my door with my screams. I know that had my father not done that, I would have done far worse to someone else, as something worse than a ghoul. As something worse than a ghoul, as some kind of fleshless revenant, I would have gone on a monstrous prowl, would have seized and devoured someone. Long ago, centuries before my birth, some far distant ancestor committed atrocities against fellow townspeople in some long forgotten village, either out of extreme desperations in dire circumstance or simple sadistic gluttony. I never found out why. I just know that he committed terrible anthropophagic crimes, cannibalized multiple people. The people related to those he'd hurt were so devastated and subsequently filled with wrath that they employed all manner of curses and maledictions, dooming him and his kin for ever and ever to unforeseeable and unpreventable malliances and restrictions, consequences related to the consumption of meat. Not long after, an entire generation were rendered Not long after, an entire generation were rendered gastrointestinally incompatible with meat. Others down the line had been able to eat and not get full, no matter the quality or content. I don't think I could have lived with that polyphagic plague, not for long. My family, our consequence, for whatever reason, we cannot eat meat after 6 p.m. lest we shed our flesh and transform into hyper-ravenous fiends, skeletal nightmares who'd prey on friends, foe, or family in a frenzy of insatiable hunger. Unless we're detained, starved for a period of time, dependent on factors seemingly beyond our control, for some hours, others days. But the body eventually regenerates, and our humanity afterwards is, for the moment, restored. I'd never succumbed to that despicable, horrific state before. It was the most awful thing that had ever happened to me. Now, no matter the circumstance, I'll never forget the consequence. It's not something I can afford to overlook or gamble with. I like the alliteration that this person's put in it throughout. As you can tell, I like alliteration. So, what do we think? Yeah, reformed revenants. Right, so this brings us they've not done artwork for it, but that would be sick. No, there's not really that many kind of like artwork or something like that. I guess this looks like it would probably be the closest. So yeah, it is Slim's stream in a minute, so we're all gonna go over there. But yeah, this is like the closest thing I guess you could find for it. So like this dude here, something like that. Just maybe a bit more skeletal. Yeah, Brainless, if you could be a doll and put the Slim's stream link in. Yeah, Stream Slim. It's the best. It's the be all of being. You have to go. Like you have to. Thank you, Super Ghost. You are an absolute sweetheart. Right, so we are all going off to Stream Slim or Slim Stream if you know how to actually words. I didn't see the link that was posted because I was in a different window. Smart ass. But yeah, we will see you there, everyone. And in the off chance that anyone is actually watching this, like after the live stream, hi, hello. Sorry, I don't actually normally say hi to you. Bang in that you actually like bother watching my stuff, and feel free to actually like find Slim the Living Cyborg, which is where we'll do like go over there most days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we like just talk about random shit. Yeah, it's fun. You'll like it, trust me. And I will see everyone else over there. So bye bye everyone. Have a nice night. Toodles.